Let's get started. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the 167th Scientific Governance and Risk Meeting here at MakerDAO. My name is Peyton. I go by Pros11 online, and I am one of the governance facilitators here. So today we got a bit of an agenda to work through. We'll go over some housekeeping items first, but basically, thank you everyone for coming, whether you're live or watching us later on the YouTube. We have an awesome group of people here, both directly involved with Maker and just interested in general with what we're up to. And this is our weekly call where we discuss kind of the key things that are going on within the DAO, hold discussion topics, as well as update the community on recent governance actions. So a few notes, I guess. We do encourage questions. We encourage engagement of all types. So if you're comfortable hopping on the mic, if there's a good moment to hop in, feel free to do so. If you're not comfortable or otherwise unable, feel free to drop something in the chat and I will be more than happy to bring it up when appropriate. As a reminder, this is being recorded and saved to YouTube later. So do try not to talk over one another and be mindful that your comments can be viewed later. Excellent. I think that more or less covers things. So we'll get to the agenda here. We're starting in with the governance roundup, and that'll be done with me. Then we'll move into some community discussion. And if we still have time, we'll kind of open the floor to more broad questions that we can engage with everyone who's here. Awesome. So governance roundup. Start with the votes of the day. Generally with the polls. Was a pretty busy week for polls. If you're a Maker voter, you notice a lot of different options to give your opinion on. As far as the ones that ended today, we had 5 pass and 1 that was rejected. I've got them listed on the screen here, but I will run through them quickly. 1 pass was adding the WBTC-B vault. This again would be a lower collateralization ratio vault for WBTC, people to seek more leverage should they choose to do so. We also have the G-Uni parameter adjustments, as well as ones for wrapped stake DETH and the D3M are Aave direct DAI module. Might be getting the D's backwards there, but I'm sure someone can fix that later. The other poll that got passed was the increase to the recognized delegate compensation. So again, this is our first month of doing the recognized delegate compensation trial. So that increase will be reflected when we do the payments later this, I guess at the end of the month, sorry. The poll that was rejected was our NS drop covenant modification that was proposed. You can read up about that in the forum. 2 green light polls still up that do end in 4 days. MD Irradiance LLC, hopefully I didn't butcher that too badly, and Olympus DAO. I won't steal Pablo's thunder, who will come talk to us in a little bit about the MIPs update, but there are 8 ratification polls that are also ongoing for vote, and those close on the 22nd. So I'll give you one brief more update on the executive proposals before I pass it off. The last executive was passed and executed. This included parameter changes from the Maker Open Market Committee, as well as setting the 2 PSM's 10 parameter, which is the fee in, to 0%. And then we also had a core unit budget transfer for the development in UX core unit. The executive proposal that will go for tomorrow, you can expect that to include returning DAI from the POS proxy. That is the DAI, if you're watching the forums, that my core unit, the Gov Alpha, sent back due to over budgeting or underspending, however you want to slice it. And there will also be some parameter changes included from the polls I just mentioned on G-Uni, wrapped stake DETH, and the D3M. Awesome. Got through that without stumbling too much, so I'm going to pass it off to Pablo here and see if he can do a little better job.
Hey. Thank you, Peyton. Pablo here. Not much newsworthy from me, really. So this is going to be a shorter than usual presentation. So the ratification polls went up on Monday. There are 8 of them, one less than I predicted, and we'll now take a peep at how they're looking. As you can see, we had 3 coordinate proposal sets formally submitted. The resubmitted DICO 001, immune fire security, and the Sidestream auction services. Also, we had 4 coordinated budgets, the resubmission from content production, a budget for governance communications, a budget for real world finance, and also for real world finance and MKR compensation plan. And finally, we had a MIP 6 template amendment that adds some new real world assets exclusive questions. So last time I mentioned the special purpose fund as one of the formal submissions. Sadly, that proposal was missing a couple of details that we thought would be provided before the ratification polls went up. That wasn't the case, and it had to be left out this time. Now for stuff in RFC. Again, no changes here since last week. So we have a couple of MIPs. We have a partial coordinate proposal set for pairwise fixed rate, and we have those 2 controversial facilitator offboarding and onboarding proposals. I suggest we just skip ahead. And yes, I don't know how many of you were excited about this, 0 in all likelihood, but yeah, we finally have a dark mode on the MIPS portal, and it's looking pretty rad. Yep, and that's pretty much it from me this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Pablo. Appreciate that update. And I, for one, am excited about the dark mode, so you can count at least one there. Next, we'll have a forum at a glance update. This segment where we walk through what's been going on our Maker forum. And I believe Artem will be taking that away.
Yep. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Maker Forum at a Glance, a weekly review of what's happened on the forums, this time for the week of November 4th to November 11th. So let's begin with the top announcements. First off, GFX Labs announces their delegate platform. The GFX Labs community desires to be active participants in Maker governance and provide communication and reasoning behind their votes. To learn more about their delegate platform, check out the Meet Your Delegate call number 6, which will be happening on November 17th. Next up, Maker Wormhole definitely takes the cake with their logo. I mean, like, I saw it and it looks nice. I love their logo. But yeah, so they introduced DAI wormholing, which is the ability for almost instantaneous teleportation of DAI between supported layer 2s and Ethereum. The design is fully trustless and allows system participants to bridge virtually unlimited liquidity through instantaneous minting of DAI towards the destination domains. And L2 to L1 fast withdrawal should be available around Q1 of 2022, and the complete wormhole feature should be available around Q2 2022. Definitely check out the post for a technical breakdown of Maker Wormhole. Next up, Lowlight from Collateral Engineering Services Core Unit introduces DSS Blow, which is a new helper smart contract that helps make it easy for core units to repay excess DAI to the MakerDAO surplus buffer. With DSS Blow, you can send ERC20 DAI directly to the DSS Blow contract address. Once DAI has been received by DSS Blow, anyone can call in the new Blow function to send all deposited DAI in DSS Blow as internal DAI to the surplus buffer. Moving on to the top 3 discussions. Historically, we have always tried to keep up the surplus to non-stablecoin DAI ratio around between 1% and 2%. However, controlling the surplus buffer becomes more difficult with more collaterals onboarded, and the rapid growth of DAI supply forming conflicted community sentiment. In response, Shupi submitted a pre-MIP discussion proposing that we introduce an instant access module that would allow any user to adjust the surplus buffer based on parameters decided by Maker governance. He provides dimensions and parameters in the post and seeks feedback and community discussion on his idea. Next up, with successful rollout of D3M to Aave, Paper Imperium wants to gauge the sentiment of the community to make it a priority to extend D3M to Compound. He lays out the pros and cons and asks whether we should integrate compound into D3M as a priority. If yes votes outnumber the no votes, on-chain poll will be presented to vote on the prioritization of D3M to compound. And finally, Ruli introduces centrifuge collateral and presents an arranger idea with MakerDAO. The centrifuge team begins with addressing legal concerns brought by the community, along with other next steps, which involve bringing real-world assets on-chain into Maker as a collateral in a scalable and sustainable way, with Maker as one of their key partners. They introduce their proposal and seek feedback and discussion from the community. Now, moving to our active signal requests. Shupi is signaling to the community in request to increase the surplus buffer. He asks the community where we want to set the surplus buffer and whether we want to keep earning some of the profits. And our next signal request, DAI minted from WBTC has recently been increasing, and the amount of DAI has been tripled within the last month. So a large market downturn on WBTC vaults running with higher liquidation ratio is less likely to undergo liquidations, less likely resulting in loss for the protocol and the vault owner. And in response, Shupi signals to the community asking whether we should add a new WBTC vault with a higher liquidation ratio. Both of these signals end on November 19th, and that's it. For more information on the forum at a glance, it includes a 3-point summary, evaluation and reports. It also has a few more announcements and discussions along with ongoing initiatives and help wanted.
Which just want to jump in here really quickly. If any of the facilitators are actively hiring, please reach out to Artem and let him know, and he'll add whatever role you're hiring for in the help wanted section, along with some contact info for who they should contact if they're interested in the role.
Right on. Well, thanks for that, Artem. We really appreciate it. We'll move on to our next segment. Today, we're fortunate in that we get a presentation. Doesn't happen every week. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to the Sidestream auction services, who will be proposing or showing us a demo, rather. Words.
Yeah, thank you.
I will make you co-host right now, Daniel. Give me just a second. Oh, actually, I can't. The host has to do that. Peyton, can you hook him up?
Should be good to go now.
Yeah, works. Cool. So, can you see my screen? Great. So, yeah, thanks for having us. I'm Daniel. I'm the facilitator of Sidestream Auction Services. And here we are an SES incubation team that is going to form a new core unit. And we joined the incubation in summer. And now since Monday, we are up for voting. And hopefully we'll be a permanent core unit as of December. And yeah, so we are an engineering core unit, and our mission is to improve security, transparency, and accessibility of the Maker protocol by providing and maintaining auction services through open source development. So yeah, we are really diving into all these things around liquidations and auctions. Yeah, so we actually, so one slide about us. We're from Sidestream, and that's a German software development company that myself and my co-founder Niels started like 2 years ago, and we've grown it to 20 people. And we basically do a lot of custom software development services for like bigger customers, a lot of in traditional finance. But yeah, we are really happy to work together with MakerDAO, and we imagine to have a dedicated business unit with the team that's already working on the auction services since summer, and so that we are very focused on this project, but can also leverage the software agency know-how that we have from like other projects that we do. And the team that is working on the auction services, so it's myself as a facilitator, Lucas as a product manager, Valentin and Ben as full stack developers, and Niels as a DevOps engineer. And so some of us work half-time, as you can see, the FTE count, and some full-time for Maker. And the last slide before the actual demo, a bit more detail what we're gonna do. So the vision is to provide and maintain systems on top of the existing auction mechanism, and by that contribute to security and growth of the Maker protocol. And so on the one hand, we want to visualize auction data to increase transparency on what's actually going on, but also to generate insights to make more informed decisions. Also, a lot of our work is about providing intuitive UIs, but also well-maintained APIs, so interfaces for non-technical and technical users to basically increase the accessibility and adoption of auctions and liquidations. And lastly, we want to ensure that there's always sufficient participation in auction, especially like in extreme circumstances. So we're talking a lot about onboarding new collateral types, and we want to be the core unit that ensures that once a collateral type is onboarded, all the auction liquidations functionality and all the APIs and UIs are in place to cope with that. But also in case of inefficient market conditions through our software, we hope to basically increase participation to protect the protocol, but also vote on this. And yeah, with that, I will just show you a video of what we have built so far. For that, I need to reshare my screen. Can you see the video now? Yeah, okay, great. So,
hi everyone, my name is Lucas, product manager for Sidestream auction services, and I'm very happy to give you a quick demo walkthrough of our MVP. We created the first UI that facilitates participation in collateral auctions via flash lending feature. This means there are no capital requirements for participation, so a user doesn't need to have any DAI balances available. The only requirement is actually to have some ETH in order to pay for the transaction fees. Let's dive right away into the UI. What you can see here is the main auctions table that contains all of the active auctions and those that need to be restarted. For demo purposes, we are currently on Kovan testnet, indicated here in the header as well. And that is also why we can see some very small ETH auctions currently ongoing here. Now, the selection of one of these auctions provides in-depth information on this particular auction, like, for example, the auction time till it ends. Then we have the current auction price per collateral in DAI and the equivalent collateral price on another marketplace. For our MVP, we focused on Uniswap, but the idea is to connect to other DEXs in the future as well. So this should give the user already a quite good indication on the potential arbitrage opportunity due to price differences between the first marketplace, which is basically the auction, and the second marketplace, in this case, Uniswap. This becomes even more evident when clicking on the directly swap into profit button. Again, here you can see the different prices, auction and on Uniswap. And we also get an indication on the potential profit that can be made by participating in this auction. We give an approximation of the involved transaction fees, and finally give an indicator on the overall transaction outcome. Now, before the actual execution of the flash lending, 2 auth steps are required. This is one-time authorization of DAI Choi contract and the authorization of the Clipper contract, which needs to happen once per collateral type. Now, since these have been done for the wallet in use in the past, we do not have to do them and can directly execute the flash loan. But before that, let's have another look into the wallet to re-emphasize the point that there is really no DAI requirement, so no capital requirement to participate in this auction. Now, if we hit the execution button, we are, as always, prompted with a MetaMask window to confirm the transaction fees. We are doing that. And now we get a visual indication here with this toast notification in the top about the current status of the transaction. Of course, depending on the current network congestion, this can take some time, but with the notifications here and also the spinners, we want to prevent to leave the user in the dark about the current transaction state. Now that the auction was successfully mined and confirmed, we do display that here at the top, stating that the auction is finished. And let's have a quick look into our wallet again. What we can see here now is that we were able to exploit the arbitrage opportunity, obtain some DAI by participating in this auction. So to put this feature a little bit into perspective, in case of an inefficient keeper ecosystem, meaning the bots that would automatically detect and engage in these auctions, this UI now provides a mechanism to manually participate in auctions via flash loan capability. So clearly this was a lot of information and context that is required for a user to actually understand all of the steps and actions on this UI. For a new user, this might be complex and even intimidating, which in the end might hinder auction participation. And that is why we also implemented an explanatory mode, changeable with the switch in the header. Yeah, it provides more context on what this UI is good for, and especially why and how a user should interact with it. It also reflects part of our vision, namely to create intuitive UIs to increase the accessibility and the adoption. And if we think one step further, it even helps stability, because not only experts are now able to participate, but also a wider audience being comfortable to participate in the auctions, which in the end might increase chances that protocol depth is covered with auction participation. Speaking of features, we have this narration-based flow here where the user is able to read from top to bottom to understand all of the context and what's going on this UI. We provide explanatory tooltips that if the user wants to go down the rabbit hole, also link to the respective passages of the maker documentation. And another accessibility feature, for example, when the user tries to switch from within MetaMask to a network which is currently not supported, we do reflect that with a pop-up that enforces the user to change to one of the two networks that are currently supported. Yeah, so this is basically it. I hope this gave a good first insight on the capabilities of our MVP. There is more to come in the future, and we are really excited and looking forward to build. For now, feel free to have your own look on auctions.makerdao.network. Code is also open sourced. Please give us feedback. And of course, last remark, if you're more comfortable with the dark mode, we also have your back. So thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Yeah, so thanks to Lucas for recording this, and yeah, that's our presentation. Hope you're gonna vote for us, and yeah, happy to answer questions.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I think the value proposition is absolutely incredible. Actually, you know what? I take back my question. I'm thinking about it. I think it's actually a stupid question. So I'm going to leave it to somebody else.
I have a question. So I remember when we originally enabled like flash loan auctions, we were not concerned, but we were like aware that like MEV might be an issue, right? Like and having like flash bots and things like front run the flash loan auction transactions. Have you guys thought about that at all?
Can you rephrase the question about if we thought about front running by bots? Yeah,
because the flash loan auction transactions are quite easy to front run, right? Because they're kind of self-contained and they don't require any capital. Like so, this kind of UI, it looks awesome, right? It's amazing. But if every time anyone uses it, like the transaction fails because they get front run, then that's not ideal. So
yeah, so I mean the main purpose of the UI is to have basically another backstop solution, so that if there's no participation, that you can that participate through the UI, and then the next step will be basically providing scripts or APIs to participate in these auctions. But currently we don't see front running as a problem, but rather it's good if there's someone bidding on these auctions.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions about the Sidestream or the core unit in general, or the demo itself, I guess?
Yeah, I have one question. First of all, I think this is really cool for our Keeper ecosystem. But I'm curious, you said you're only supporting Uniswap. Is it V2 or V3? And then second, does the price in the UI, does it include slippage as well? So price slippage when selling this collateral?
I think that's for Lucas. Do you want to?
Yeah, I can maybe answer. So it's a V2 for now, but we're planning to upgrade to support also automatic routing at some point. And then, yes, it includes the slippage. So it's calculated based on the actual amount that will be sold using the Uniswap SDK.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Welcome.
Awesome. Appreciate you coming on and giving this demo. As mentioned, that vote is live, so do take a look and give your opinion if you're an MKR voter. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Appreciate it. And now we're going to move on to the Oracle score unit. I believe Nick has put together a little something for our consideration today.
Sure. Unfortunately, I'm not quite the don't quite have sexy presentations and videos like everyone else. I do have I do have MIPs that will do it, but they're fairly text heavy. So, but let's see how we do here. Okay, you need to enable screen sharing for me.
Just made you co-host. I think if David stops sharing, you should be good to go.
Okay, cool. There we go. Okay, so we talked about this on previous calls, right? That right now the gas costs for the oracles are not included in the current Oracle core unit budget, and that those would come at a later date. I've also covered in the past on here that the Maker Foundation generously offered to front the gas cost since August 1st in order to give the core unit more time to kind of figure out how to best do this. And what I mean by that is that the tooling that we had back then to really delve into, what oracles cost us from an infrastructure point of view, were not very granular. So we basically had the holistic view of, well, we know how much ETH is going in, and so that's how much we're spending in total. But we didn't have this more granular kind of scalpel-like view of, oh, well, the ETH oracle is costing us this much, right? The ZRX oracle is costing us this much, right? The Uniswap LP oracles cost this much. And so we've recently, started creating tooling and dashboards that gives us insight into these types of things. And so it's kind of time to finish the transition of the Oracle core unit, and the Oracle infrastructure out of the foundation and to have it be kind of completely decentralized. So the way that we're thinking of structuring this is that we will typically be asking for kind of a rolling 3-month budget. So we basically will submit a MIP sub-proposal, and we say we expect to spend this amount in the next 3 months. What's different from this first proposal is that it will also include the repayment to the Maker Foundation for fronting the cost since the beginning of August. And since that's kind of a rolling kind of timer, we've kind of assumed that due to the way kind of governance works, is that we think, okay, by end of December, this MIP should be passed, or some version of this MIP should be passed. And so we'll say in the MIP that the cutoff for that is end of December, right? But if it gets passed earlier than that or later than that, right, we'll have to adjust the payment amount to the foundation. But what I really want to get across today and with this MIP is really just the analytics themselves, right, where they're coming from and how we deduce the numbers in the budget for the MIP itself. These are basically Dune analytics that we've hooked up to the smart contracts. So we can happily provide the link for these so you can verify the data for yourself. But it basically uses the transaction data directly from the blockchain in order to compile these metrics. So this is for the costs since August 1st to November 8th, which was a few days ago. Keep in mind, this is just the medianizers. This is not the rest, like the entirety of the costs. So before you get all happy, oracles are way more expensive than this. So the medianizer, right, is just this continuous oracle kind of price, right? This is not the value that the Maker protocol uses, right? There's other layers to that. This is just a bunch of feeds reach a consensus that the price of, ETH at time X is blah. So we spent about a little over $600,000 on that since August, and we'll kind of go later more in detail into what that extrapolates to over the course of a year. Here you can kind of see the breakdown by asset pair. Not sure how well you can see this, so let me try to zoom in a little bit. But you'll notice, right, that some assets have these very large spikes, and it's because their volatility profile just is very high, right? Or especially in the kind of current markets, right, where everything just has a random, I don't know, 70% pump or something, right? You can easily have days, right, where you spend, the amount that you would normally spend in, say 2-3 weeks of operating one of these oracles in a single day. And that kind of leads to a lot of uncertainty when it comes to trying to predict the cost of any single oracle. But it is helped by the fact that most oracles, if you have a large enough sample size, don't behave this way. And then the outliers themselves, even though individually it has a big effect on their cost compared to the whole, it's dampened quite a bit. Okay, so this table, and again, I apologize, I know the text is quite small. This table kind of shows what we spend on the individual medianizers. So compared to that, $600,000 number above, right? This is what we spent since August 1st on the individual medianizers. You'll notice that ETH is the highest, and that is because there are certain special factors about the ETH oracle that we use to make it update more frequently. Because ETH is such a very big part of our portfolio, it is very important that we get a very accurate Ethereum price. And so we have the spread parameter set to 0.5%. What this means is that every time the market price of ETH differs from the price the medianizer is reporting by over 0.5%, it gets triggered to update the price. Compare this to say something like Tether, right, where the price of Tether does not move very much, right? It's a stable coin, right, or we think it's a stable coin, right? And so the costs for updating the Tether oracle are substantially lower. It really likes jumping around here. Right, so here you can there you can see the daily gas consumption by, and this is just the medianizers. So this is basically all of the medianizers together. How much are we spending on gas? You'll notice that even though it's quite volatile, there's clearly an uptrend since the beginning of August. And this will kind of be important later when we're trying to create the budget, because it's not, what we think. The budget has to be based not on, well, we spent this much in the last 3 months, so this is how much we think we'll need in the next 3 months, right? You have to assume that this trend will continue or maybe even accelerate, right? And so the budget itself comes down to not really the realized costs, but basically an expression of a defensive, like more of a defensive expression of, in the worst case, what will this cost us, right? Okay, so now going down to the Oracle security module and the spotter and the Uniswap LP costs. So from a dashboard kind of tracking perspective, until now, we haven't been able to segregate these yet in a automated type of way. To kind of explain kind of what the architecture here looks like is, right? So you have this medianizer here that we talked about earlier, that is this real-time price. You have the Oracle security module, right, which just applies this delay to the price. So it's poked once an hour, and it takes in whatever price is in the medianizer, and whatever price was queued up previously kind of becomes the canonical price. So that's the OSM, the Oracle security module. And then you have one more module on the Maker protocol side that's part of the core Maker protocol, which is called the spotter. And the spotter is essentially how does Maker read from the OSM, right? So the spotter needs to be basically checking the OSM to map that value internally, because what you don't want is you don't want the Maker Oracle protocol kind of core contracts to be reaching out to this external Oracle security module contract constantly. So it would be a very expensive kind of gas operation. And so this is kind of, the spotter is kind of just a, import at once, and now everything in the core contracts can use it as an imported value rather than always having to fetch this much more expensive kind of external value. And so you'll notice, right, that this number is higher than the medianizer number, but it's essentially because it's this homologation of this Oracle security module, of this spotter module. And it actually also includes the Uniswap v2 LP oracles and the new G-Uni oracle. So it's kind of this superset. So from this top level view, yeah, this is kind of how much we've spent since August 1st. We've spent about almost $1.4 million. But we'll kind of break it down a little more into the components themselves in a little bit. Again, you see the gas consumption, right, trending up. This corresponds exactly what we saw with the medianizer, right, going up since August 1st. And so here's where we start to break it down a little bit. So these are kind of the, this is the gas profile kind of distribution of of using this Omega Poker kind of contract that we use. So effectively what this means is every time you poke this Omega Poker contract and it updates the OSMs, it updates the spotter, it updates the Uniswap, LP oracles, G-Uni. This is kind of the distribution of the gas costs within that call, right? And so you'll see that, we spend 30% on the spotter, we spend 24% on the Oracle security module, we spend, 33.3% on the Uniswap v2 LP oracles, and 7% on G-Uni, right? And then there's kind of 5% that's just like other, that's just kind of the scaffolding. So using this, right, top level number that we had, right, along with this gas profile breakdown, we can start to calculate, you know, what we're spending for each one, right? This is just those proportions, right? So in that time, right, we spent this much on OSMs, this much on LP oracles, this much on spotters, and this much on G-Uni. You'll notice that all of those amounts are kind of less than the medianizer, and that makes sense because the medianizer does a lot more kind of computational work. So let's break it down kind of further. You know, how much does each OSM cost? Each OSM costs about $75,000. Sorry, during over the course of a year. Each Uniswap LP oracle kind of costs us $184,000 a year. Each spotter kind of costs us $60,000 a year. Okay, great. Now that's not the total cost for the oracles, but now we have all the pieces that we need to come up with those costs, right? So a standard oracle, right? It starts with a medianizer. It then has an oracle security module, and it then has a spotter, right? So it's the accumulation of all of these. So for the ETH oracle, extrapolated over a year, we're spending total $331,000. To put that into perspective, compare that to something like YFI, which has more kind of lax spread parameters and is kind of like Maker, and that it's a stable coin. It doesn't fluctuate very much in price. The YFI oracle is $259,000 a year, right? So you can see this kind of range, right? These are the exact same architecture, and the only difference is here is the volatility profile of the asset and kind of these slight little tuning things like the spread parameter. So there is some room to make oracles more or less sensitive and tune them if we want to tune the costs up or down. Looking at the Uniswap LP oracles, right? You have the oracle itself, plus you have this spotter. So those cost about $245,000 annually. And then you have G-Uni. Now with G-Uni, this is, we're not 100% confident in this number because we just onboarded it very recently. So the data set that we have to work with is quite limited, but it shouldn't be off by more than, say, like, I don't know, 5%. So it's still very expensive, right? It's significantly more expensive than the other type of oracles. So that's something that we need to consider when we think about onboarding more of the gelato based tokens. So just a quick kind of mental calculus of, well, where does that leave us in terms of kind of unprofitable vaults? I came up with a list here of basically all the vaults that are currently unprofitable relative to these oracle costs that we just calculated. So governance already had a signal request to offboard Aave, Balancer, and Comp. So those are right. There's polling votes that are active for that. So I hope governance kind of considers the return that these vaults are making relative to what they're costing us just in oracle expenses. Right, that's not even compensating for the risk component that MKR is ensuring. That's just the oracle expenditures. But there's a couple other ones, right, that are unprofitable as well here, right? That really staked ETH, right, is limited due to debt ceiling right now. So that one's kind of an outlier here. But the rest, we should have very good reasons for why we continue to have these collateral types when they're losing us money by the second. Okay, so what does this cost on an annual basis? And this is kind of the sticker shock number, right? This was what we were spending on medianizers. This is what we spent on the the OSM spotter, Uniswap V2 oracles, right? And now extrapolating since August 1st, extrapolating that over a year, you arrive at this number that's $7.2 million, which is a huge chunk of change, right? And what you have to keep in mind is, right, we talked about this earlier, right? Gas costs are trending up, and we have to assume that the kind of worst case scenario that they will keep going up, right? And so the budget has to reflect that. What do we need for this particular proposal? Well, extrapolating that, 7.2 million number over 3 months gives us this $1.8 million number. And then because we need to guard against gas cost increases, we put in a multiplicative factor of 2. So we're going to be asking for almost $3.6 million to kind of safely cover the Oracle gas cost budget for through the end of March 2022. Then we also need to refund the Maker Foundation, right, for the costs that they've incurred thus far and the costs that we expect they're going to incur before this proposal is kind of passed. And remember, we use the end of December as a kind of cutoff date. But if it's earlier than that, right, of course, the foundation would get less. If it's more than that, right, the foundation gets more, right? It's really just moving in and out of this this bucket up here, right? So someone is paying for it. It's either coming out of this bucket or the foundation's paying for it. But ultimately, right, it's the same pool of money. And then as a further defensive measure, what we wanted is we want effectively an extra 3 months, but not kind of modulated by this gas scaling factor, just the vanilla 3 months in kind of an emergency kind of separate multi-sig, which, if like we literally blow through our expectations that gas costs are going to double, then we can dip into this. We obviously, no one expects to dip into the emergency funds, but I'll give you an example, right? On Black Thursday, we saw gas prices that went up to 3,000 gwei. And because the sky was falling and because, the difference between, 3,000 gwei was either you got liquidated or you didn't get liquidated, right? People were easily willing to pay, $8,000 a transaction, $5,000 a transaction to ensure that, they were safe. So in a day like that, right, depending on how close we are to that, end of the 3-month cycle, if you have one of these outlier events, right, that would be one of those situations where you would have to dip into the emergency fund. Which basically leads to the kind of big sticker shock number here of so what does all of that sum into? And it sums to $8.4 million. I want to kind of open it up to questions. I know we don't have a lot of time either. One note that I do want to bring up is, well, I think a common reaction to this might be, why the hell are we spending this much on oracles when we could use some external provider or something? And the answer to that is, one is you don't want to outsource your security to someone else. But two is it wouldn't actually save us that much money. So the actual Oracle itself piece, right, is this piece right here. The other pieces that Maker has built around the Oracle to ensure that we're defended against an Oracle attack, to ensure that we're not going to just automatically liquidate a couple billion from one moment to the next without giving people a chance to pay back, right? That's this number over here, right? So really only a third of the costs actually are coming from our oracles. The other 2/3 of the costs are really from the kind of maker scaffolding that we've built around the oracles. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and submit to the merry mob.
Was your assumption on the doubling of cost based on the actual costs from the past 99 days? Or is it based on the current run rate?
It's based on the current run rate. So right, I don't think the sampling from the last, since August is that relevant. Like if you zoom out from the chart, right, it's just very, very volatile. So trying to establish some kind of trend using that type of limited data set, I think is quite foolish. So I wouldn't focus too much on the 2x number. It's very much like a spitball kind of number, because I don't think there's the data set is really big enough to come up with anything more kind of algorithmic or deterministic.
Yeah, I'm more looking at just like the average GUE assumption used for the forecast essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So like right now, I think average GUE has been around 175 a day, so that would imply about 350, right, for the doubling.
Yeah. Well, okay. So it depends if you want to use the today value or right the sampling over the last period, right? I don't take much stock in today the gas price is this because a week ago, I saw like 60 GUE.
Worth noting, it's also dependent on ETH price as well, even though like the point of GUE is to kind of separate them. It's not like a perfectly separated system still. Like it takes a while for the gas prices to adjust to the new ETH price and stuff.
Yeah. So basically the other thing that came out of this, right, is these are the numbers that really governance should consider when like thinking of onboarding a new collateral type is, well, if it's costing us, right, ETH costs us, like has cost us historically 330K since August, right? And so now let's say the gas price is double, right? And so now you're looking at 660K. So any vault that's going to make less than 660K, like don't even bother, right? You're just coin flipping based on is the gas price not going to go up and screw us, right? So we really need to be thinking of only like the really big ticket vaults that can generate at least 2 million of stability fees at the very least, right? And even that is kind of still paying people very high salaries to onboard those things. So you should really be thinking higher.
Is the plan also to just buy like essentially a lump sum of ETH, or how are you guys thinking about the technical funding of it?
Yeah, so I didn't put that implementation in the MIP because I wanted to give the core unit more flexibility in trying out different solutions with that regard. Yeah, so what I think we would do is we would want some of it in ETH and some of it in DAI, and I think the very spitball and like the kind of rough number off the top of my head would kind of be like a 50-50, where you don't want, you want some exposure to ETH, but you don't want all of your exposure in ETH. Ideally, at some point in the future, we get actual gas futures that we can use to hedge our gas costs, kind of like airlines use, oil futures to hedge their jet fuel costs. But yeah, so that's kind of where my head's at with this. But we will definitely try a few different type of models to kind of see what works better. right? The goal with this is not even necessarily to get the ultimate lowest cost for running the oracles. It's more just to bound those costs, right? So to make them more deterministic. And basically the more we can constrain, what the range of costs is going to be, right, the better off we are.
Right, and I think we can actually hedge it quite simply by just holding ETH on the balance sheet, essentially. So, the more ETH goes up, our balance sheet assets will go up.
Mhm.
That can also be used, in the future to fund Oracle fees, right?
Yeah.
So something that we can discuss on the forums, I guess.
Yeah. Let's discuss it more on the forum. The reason I don't want it all in ETH is essentially because of these, Black Thursday type scenarios where everything is crashing, right? So prices are going down, and yet GUI could be obscenely high, right? With people willing to pay, $5,000, $10,000 transaction fees, right? And so if we are completely in ETH, we would be screwed by that type of event.
Yep, right. Good point.
Go for it, David.
Yeah, so in thinking about this problem, like long term, before knowing what you were gonna do, Nick, I always kind of imagined that the Maker protocol could use the surplus buffer directly in sort of like a split solution where, some of it is held in the surplus buffer, a little bit burns MKR, and then a little bit is used to buy this, ETH, dollar cost averaging over time. And basically making a native pool within the protocol of ETH that can maybe automatically like pay oracles or something. Like that's kind of like the imagination I had in my head years ago or like a year ago. I'm curious what you think about that vision, and I'm curious what you think about
that. I think it's something the community should discuss more. My initial inclination is that probably shouldn't do that, just because like essentially you don't want to like the purpose of the core units is to delegate responsibility of things, so governance doesn't necessarily have to be an expert on all of this different stuff. And so taxing kind of governance with the inventory kind of management for specifically for the oracles, I think would be a mistake. Now, if governance wants to, in general, have exposure to ETH and diversify some of the surplus to ETH, I mean, have at it, right? But I wouldn't do it specifically because of like Oracle kind of ETH inventory management.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing.
I guess I had a question in terms of the Uniswap oracles. You kind of mentioned the V2 ones and their costs there. Are they any cheaper when we are already running oracles for the underlying assets? Like I guess I don't understand how that works.
Oh, so this was purely for the gas costs of running that Uniswap Oracle smart contract. So if you need to, in addition to those, create new medianizers, right, for the component tokens, then go ahead and add the medianizer cost on top of that, right? Right now we don't have that for any of the. Let me check one more second. I'm pretty sure that's a true statement. Yeah, we don't currently have that for any of the tokens, right? Where we onboarded a Uniswap LP token pair and we didn't have the medianizers already, quote unquote, for free because we'd already onboarded those as assets in Maker.
Gotcha, that makes sense. Thanks.
Nick.
Nadia.
So I'm so sorry.
That's so disappointing.
Now I was wondering, talking about the onboarding new collaterals. It will be great if in your risk assessment you could add the cost that, well, I know we don't know, but what will be the cost of that collateral? And I'm talking, yeah, because of the gelato LP token, I was surprised.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, those are expensive. Where is it? This thing does not like being zoomed in on, but yeah, those are really expensive.
We did switch back to David's screen, FYI.
Oh, whoops. Yeah, I was I guess.
Do you want to share your screen? I can unshare.
No, I was you guys have already seen it, but yeah, it's 377K for the G-Uni one, plus minus 5% uncertainty because the sample size is quite small.
And that's the 4-month cost as well, right? Not the annual cost.
That is the annual.
Annual. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So the stability fees on it currently are more than that, which is kind of nice. It's 50.
Well,
it's like at 50 mil.
until we just rugged it because of PSM fees. So we'll have to see going forward how much it actually generates.
Yeah, for sure.
And would that be like similar for other V3 implementations, or is it unique to Gelato?
I don't know.
Fair. Just curiosity.
Right. So for example, Kurt is creating the curve LP Oracle right now. So we could do the staked ETH curve pool, right, as a collateral type, right? And then people can basically get staked ETH yield and the curve Lido yield and such, right? But we don't necessarily know beforehand, right? One, how much demand there's going to be for that vault, and two, how much that Oracle is going to cost until we kind of really see it running. So there's always going to be cases like that, right, where it's not as clear cut for governance on what the real costs are, what the real upside is, so to a degree, we have to make some educated guesses at some point. But for this other stuff, right, the standard oracles, the just a normal collateral type, we know very precisely, right, in what, to a degree of uncertainty with gas prices, but other than that, like we have experience in knowing how much this is going to cost, right? And so we can very clearly say, okay, look, if your collateral type doesn't generate like 2 million in stability fees, like let's not bother.
We have a paper in the chat asking if you know how many hours it basically requires to build the oracles, and if we can add those into the estimated cost of onboarding.
It's not necessarily that, like once you've built it, you've kind of built it, right? So the cost to just deploy another one is rather low, right? They're just kind of incremental costs. It's the building it out the first time, right? And getting it audited and feeling comfortable that it's secure, right? That's the really expensive part, right? And I think that there are things that the core unit can add to its roadmap to limit some of these costs that we're spending on oracles, right? Like we can, for example, just by offboarding some of the unprofitable vaults, right? Not only, like that's gas that we wouldn't be spending on those vaults, right? And so if governance does that, for example, then, we might not even spend this estimated budget, right? We would be spending less, right? I said, you know, when I was talking about ETH and Wi-Fi, right, that there are tuning parameters we can make on the oracles that makes them cost a little bit less, you know, not like 50% less, but, you know, maybe like, you know, 20, 25% less. And that has to be a discussion that has to be had with risk, right? Where if you're decreasing the sensitivity of the oracle, right, how much more risk does that put on the maker protocol in terms of holding assets longer than it would otherwise like, right? But you know, it does come with the decreased kind of operation cost for the oracles, right? Another thing, you know, is, well, you know, what happens with L2? Well, that's still kind of an open question. We suspect that L2 oracles will be cheaper than layer 1 oracles. And so if there were to be some kind of maker, either the full protocol or some kind of shell of a protocol on layer 2, right, then maybe L2 could support collateral types that L1 can't support because of the oracle costs. I do want to caution, though, of thinking of L2 as this, you know, thing that's going to fix all of our problems, and I want to caution against that for like a couple reasons. One is, you know, all L2 does is segregate computational costs from really kind of storage. So, right, you don't have to do computation on L1, which is expensive, right? You do the computation on L2, but all of the call data, also all of the data that's basically passed to the smart contract on layer 2 to do those transactions, all of that call data still needs to be recorded on layer 1. And oracles are very, very heavy on call data. At least the medianizers are. OSM and Spot are not so much, but the medianizers are very heavy on call data, right? Because, and the reason is because you need to get a consensus of a bunch of feeds, right? So if you have 26 feeds, you need at least 13 to reach a quorum of, you know, the price of ETH is this, right? And so for each of those feeds, you need the price, the timestamp, and the signature, right? Saying that I've verified, you know, through my identity that time this, price this is, I'm corroborating this. And you need that for each of the 13 feeds, right? So there's a lot of data that gets passed to these functions. And so we'll have to do some kind of experiments to see what the realized costs actually are on L2. So I don't want to promise the world and then have it come short. I do think there will be cost savings. I just don't know to what magnitude yet.
It's really insightful. Thanks, Nick.
Oh, shoot, I want to ask a question.
Go for it.
Do we have a number on a per collateral, like what it costs? I'm trying to understand, get a handle around like amount of F that we need to operate the oracles per collateral. And it seems like that should be roughly linear. I know there's probably some, it's like a year and a half ago, everyone was hot to add lots of collateral types. And I was like, be careful, if they don't make us money, it's going to cost us money. And here we are, it's costing us money. And now we got to fix the cost is per collateral type so we can target the amount of DAI we think we're going to earn by posting a collateral type.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also think gas costs used to be a lot lower, right? And so things that made sense back then from an economics point of view now make less sense or don't make any sense, right? I do still think it's actually very good now that we can stop kind of pursuing things that are kind of low economic return just for the sake of doing them, right? And now we can focus on bigger targets, right? That's kind of why there was this whole, I don't know about drama or whatever, right? With thematic token, is that like, there was an agreement that they would mint a lot more DAI, and we onboarded them based off of that agreement. And then while they did mint some DAI, they didn't mint enough according to the agreement that we had. So right now they're, given how much they've borrowed right now, it's an unprofitable vault. So I really think, unless they can be convinced to uphold the original agreement and mint significantly more DAI than they're doing right now, we should just offboard them because it's unprofitable for us.
Well, I
Go for it,
agree.
Jeff.
Like, when
Sorry.
when gas was like 1 Gwei and ETH was like $200, we had a completely different ecosystem and network than 100 Gwei with ETH at $5,000. But realize, unless something radically changes again, we could have ETH at $10,000 and be at 200 Gwei in a heartbeat, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of asking just a general question, which was, do we know how much ETH it takes for a particular collateral type? You know what I'm saying? Just one of them, so that we can target and try and get to levels. I was looking at actually the Matic vault, and it looked like there, unless I was mistaken, it looked like there was 79 million in collateral in there, and they were minting about 9, and their cap was 10. And so I think they're kind of at a point where they don't feel like they can move because they wanted to go beyond 10. And so I agree with you. We can address these issues, but we kind of also need to think about a future that has even a higher ETH price, higher gas costs, and work this against what vaults we're actually going to have so that we can maintain profitability. But we might get to a point where we have to run unprofitably on oracles just because gas prices might be high temporarily. We don't want to just close vaults because they're slightly unprofitable just to kill that vault if we can make it grow. If we can't, then we definitely need to axe them. And there's a number of vaults we kind of need to look at carefully to axe. So I just wanted to know if there's a number on ETH for like one collateral type. What does it cost us in ETH per collateral type? So we can run these numbers for the future.
That number isn't, I think you're, the hole in your argument here is there is no consistent ETH number. It's not like it's 100 ETH to run this oracle, and if the price of ETH goes up or down, it doesn't matter. It's 100 ETH, right? That's not how gas prices work. They're highly volatile. So you typically, the trend is if ETH goes up, right? And the causality here, right, is questionable, but there is a relationship between ETH going up and gas prices going up, or maybe it's gas price, markets are going up there, it generates more interest, more activity, and therefore gas prices go up. Whatever causality that relationship has, there is some correlation, but it's not absolute, right? There are events, right, which we covered earlier, right, like Black Thursday, right, where ETH can go down and yet gas prices go inverse, right? That being said, right, your other argument of, okay, yeah, gas prices could go sky high, right? We do need to have a plan in place, for what happens if, maybe it's okay for vaults to go be a little bit unprofitable for some period of time, but we need to define what is a little bit unprofitable that we are willing to eat, and and what is a small period of time, right? So when we violate those thresholds, that there is a clear course of action, and we don't spend, I don't know, 2-3 months of bureaucracy trying to decide what to do, right? That there's already a plan in place and we just execute on it.
Yeah, I agree. I was just trying to, I guess I'm going to learn more about medianizer because I'm just trying to get a handle on cost per collateral type, right? Within medianizer, if we do N, what is the cost for N+1? I'm just trying to get a handle on, I know there's a total cost for the whole thing that's probably fixed to some element, but then there's a cost per collateral type, and I'm trying to understand what that is, so I understand what it costs for us to have not just the system, but to add individual collateral types. And that's all I'm getting
Sure.
at, is that all this
Sure.
other stuff comes out of that. And I'm going to leave it here. Thanks.
So those are the numbers that I presented in the MIP, and I'll be publishing this so you can take a look at those numbers more closely. But they're you know, they're just what we've seen in the past. They're not necessarily indicative of what we see in the future, right? So you have to look at this number and be like, okay, 330K, let's say, okay, how does that scale? Okay, let's assume really bad scenario, gas prices triple. Okay, it's $1 million, right? Instead of just fixating on the 330K number and you know, that's what it costs us to onboard a collateral type. That's what it costs us today. It's not what it might cost us a month from now, 3 months from now, a year from now.
Yep. The reason we can't do this, MakerMan, is because the cost is denominated in units of gas, right? And the price of gas changes as the GUI change, and the price of that changes based on ETH. So it's like, we can't like, we could, I guess, figure out the total gas units each thing's costs per month, right? And that would be a fixed amount-ish. But like, yeah, you can't figure out in like fixed in ETH terms or dollar terms, right?
Someone to know. Josh has had his hand up for a bit, so.
Yeah. So I've been living in this fantasy world, I realize, where I thought level twos were.
Do us all a favor, put the mic a little bit away from your mouth. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Is it better now?
Much better, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so I was living in this fantasy world, I realized, where I thought level twos were, you know, gonna solve our problems, but it sounds like, do we even have a plan for like addressing, you know, like the stock exchanges have thousands of stocks, like Russell 3000 and New York Stock Exchange. Like, it doesn't sound like we even have a plan for supporting that kind of throughput.
Yeah, it kind of remains to be seen, right? Sharding, which is kind of this fairy tale unicorn thing that people talk about, you know, is still years off, and that kind of helps with the data component, right? L2s are supposed to solve the computation component. Shards solve the data problem. You know, is there some things that maybe we can do? Well, it's all just trade-offs. It's all compromises, right? So like, and it's just what compromises is maker governance willing to accept in other areas in order to reduce things like Oracle costs. So for example, you know, we looked at the medianizer cost only being like a third of the total Oracle cost, right? Of this, you know, Oracle security module spotter kind of combination. If governance is willing to go an Oracle attack on certain vault types, right, you know, that are maybe smaller in debt ceiling size, you could just hook up a medianizer to a vault. Is that a good trade-off to make? Don't even remotely want to comment on that, right? Everyone is going to be very opinionated on that, but there's no magic bullet, right? It's just it's just kind of where you want to pile the risk up.
Awesome. I am noting the time here. You know, we had a few other good questions and potential discussion topics in the chat. We might have to postpone those to a later meeting or perhaps to the forum. But we'll give everyone one last chance. If there was something you're dying to say or ask, now would be your time to do it. We'll really appreciate the presentation, Nick, and look forward to seeing that on the forum.
Yep, should be up later today.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming and engaging. Like I mentioned earlier, let's please keep the discussion going on the forum. There are a few topics we didn't quite get to today. We'll make sure to include them in a prompt governance call. And yeah, thanks everyone for coming. Have a good one.